The phone lit up at 6:47 a.m. Harlan Virex didn't look at it right away. He was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window of his Manhattan penthouse, watching the city wake up 18 stories below. The coffee in his hand was still hot. The silence was perfect. Then the buzz came again. He glanced down at the screen. A notification. A credit card charge. $3,812. His black card. The one he'd given away yesterday. Harlan set the coffee down. His jaw tightened. He tapped the notification and the details loaded. Pediatric Oncology Pharmacy. Queens, New York. Not a hotel. Not food. Not clothes. Cancer drugs. His chest went cold. He stared at the screen like it was lying to him. Poor people didn't buy cancer drugs first. They bought shoes. They bought phones. They bought things they wanted, not things they needed. That's what his guardian had told him. That's what he believed his entire life. Give poor people money and they'll burn it. But this woman, she wasn't burning it. Hi friend, before we continue the story, kindly tell us where are you watching from. And hit that subscribe button now for you to get more, and I have something new for you tomorrow. Stay tuned. Thanks. Let's continue. Harlan walked back to the window. His reflection stared back at him. 41 years old. $18.6 billion in assets. Hedge funds in Manhattan. Tech patents in San Francisco. Real estate in Miami. He could move markets with a phone call. But right now, he couldn't move. Another buzz. $1,200. Children's shelter deposit. Long Island City. Then another. $980. Diagnostic lab fee. Brooklyn. No jewelry. No spa. No designer bags. Only things no one would buy unless they were desperate. For someone else. Harlan's hand shook. He didn't know why. He scrolled through the charges again. Every single one was medical. Every single one was for a child. Not her child. Other people's children. His throat felt tight. He sat down on the leather couch and stared at the phone like it was a bomb. Who was this woman? What was she doing? And why did it feel like she was tearing apart everything he'd ever believed? What would you do if you had unlimited money for 24 hours? Harlan hadn't always been rich. He grew up in a rusted steel town outside Pittsburgh where the only sound louder than the factory machines was his guardian's voice. Marcus Virex. A man who owned 3 steel plants and zero sympathy. When Harlan was 12, Marcus brought him to the factory floor. The heat was suffocating. The smell of oil and burnt metal stuck in his throat. Workers moved like shadows, their faces covered in soot. Marcus grabbed Harlan's shoulder and pointed at them. You see those men? They chose this. They didn't work hard enough in school. They didn't save. They didn't think ahead. Poverty isn't bad luck, boy. It's bad character. Harlan never forgot that. He built his empire on it. At 23, he started a hedge fund in New York City. By 30, he was buying failing hospitals in poor neighborhoods and flipping them for profit. The families who depended on those hospitals. Gone. The workers who lost their jobs. Irrelevant. He told himself they chose it. At 35, his company replaced 4,000 warehouse workers in Dallas with automation. The layoffs made national news. Harlan didn't flinch. He gave one interview. Progress doesn't wait for people who refuse to adapt. Wall Street loved him. By 41, he owned pieces of Seattle, Boston, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and Miami. His portfolio was untouchable. His reputation was bulletproof. And his belief was unshakable. Poor people were poor because they made bad choices. That's what he told himself every time he signed an eviction notice. Every time he shut down a hospital. Every time he fired someone's father. Until yesterday. Until her. Harlan looked at his phone again. The charges were still rolling in. $2,400. Hospital bill payment. Bronx. $3,100. Rent assistance fund. Queens. She wasn't buying purses. She wasn't booking flights. She was paying bills for strangers. And that terrified him. Because if she was right, then everything he'd built was wrong. Do you think poor people are poor because of bad luck or bad choices? 6 miles away, Lyrian Cade was holding her daughter's hand. They were sitting on a metal bench under the elevated subway tracks in Long Island City. The morning sun hadn't reached them yet. The air smelled like diesel and damp concrete. Perrin was asleep. Her head rested on Lyrian's lap. Her breathing was shallow. Her hospital wristband was still on her wrist. Lyrian hadn't slept. She'd been counting hours. The hospital had called yesterday at 4 p.m. The voice on the other end was polite but firm. Ms. Cade, we need $4,000 by noon tomorrow or we'll have to remove Perrin from the treatment program. Lyrian didn't cry. She just asked one question. What happens if I can't pay? The voice paused. Then we stop the medication. Lyrian hung up. She sat on the floor of the subway station and stared at the wall. She'd already sold everything. Her car. Her laptop. Her jewelry. Even her last pair of heels. There was nothing left. Perrin stirred in her lap. Her eyes opened. She looked up at her mother. Mama, are we going home today? Lyrian's throat burned. She forced a smile. Not yet, baby. Soon. Perrin closed her eyes again. Lyrian looked at her daughter's face. 7 years old. Pale skin. Dark circles under her eyes. Blood cancer. Stage 3. The doctors said she had months. Maybe weeks. But only if the treatment continued. By noon, Perrin would either live or be erased from the hospital system. Lyrian checked the time on a cracked phone someone had given her at the shelter. 9:14 a.m. 2 hours and 46 minutes left. She stood up carefully, lifting Perrin into her arms. The little girl didn't wake up. Lyrian walked toward the pharmacy on the corner. Her legs were shaking. She had no money. No plan. No hope. But yesterday, something impossible had happened. A man in a suit had given her a credit card. A black card with no limit. And 24 hours to use it. Lyrian didn't know why. She didn't ask. She just took it. Because her daughter didn't have tomorrow. Would you trust a stranger's credit card if your child's life depended on it? The cameras were everywhere. Harlan stood outside the Manhattan Convention Center in Midtown, surrounded by reporters. He was being interviewed about a new cancer drug his biotech company had just patented. The journalist smiled into the camera. Mr. Virex, critics say your company's pricing will make this drug inaccessible to low-income families. What's your response? Harlan didn't blink. Innovation costs money. If people want access, they need to work harder. The crowd murmured. Some nodded. Others frowned. Then someone screamed. Harlan turned. A woman was stumbling toward him through the crowd. Her clothes were wrinkled. Her hair was tangled. She had a child in her arms. Security moved in. Ma'am, step back. The woman collapsed. Not dramatically. Not violently. She just fell. The little girl in her arms hit the pavement and started crying. The crowd gasped. Cameras swung toward them. Harlan's assistant grabbed his arm. "Sir, we need to go." But Harlan didn't move. He was staring at the little girl's wrist. A hospital band. Pediatric oncology. The woman pushed herself up on her elbows. Her eyes met his. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She just looked tired. Harlan walked toward her. Security hesitated. The reporters followed. He stopped in front of her and crouched down. "Why are you here?" The woman's voice was steady. "Because my daughter doesn't have tomorrow." Silence. The cameras zoomed in. Harlan felt every lens on him. He looked at the little girl. She was staring at him with wide, hollow eyes. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a black titanium credit card. No spending limit. No restrictions. He held it out to the woman. "You have 24 hours. Spend whatever you want. Do what poor people always do with money." The crowd gasped. The woman's hand shook as she took it. Harlan stood up and smiled at the cameras. "Let's see what she buys." The reporters loved it. They called it a social experiment. A viral moment. A test of character. Harlan walked away feeling powerful. But he had just handed her something far more dangerous than money. He'd handed her a mirror. Do you think she'll spend it on herself or someone else? The first charge came at 6:47 a.m. Harlan was still at the window when his phone buzzed again. $3,812. Pediatric Oncology Pharmacy. Queens. He stared at it. His assistant walked in with a tablet. "Sir, the charges are coming through. Do you want me to track them?" Harlan nodded slowly. Another buzz. $1,200. Children's Shelter Deposit. Long Island City. His assistant's eyes widened. "She's not buying anything for herself." Harlan didn't respond. He was watching the charges roll in like a slot machine he couldn't stop. $980. Diagnostic lab fee. Brooklyn. $2,400. Hospital bill payment. Bronx. $1,650. Emergency medical fund. Harlem. No purses. No shoes. No hotels. Only medicine. Only bills. Only other people's children. Harlan's chest felt tight. He sat down and scrolled through the list again. Every charge was a name he didn't know. A family he'd never meet. A child who wasn't hers. His assistant leaned over. "Sir, why would she do this?" Harlan didn't answer. Because he didn't know. And that was the problem. He'd spent 20 years believing poor people were selfish. That they wasted money. That they didn't deserve help. But this woman. She wasn't wasting anything. She was giving it away. Another charge appeared. $3,100. Rent Assistance Fund. Queens. Harlan stood up and grabbed his coat. "Where are you going, sir?" He didn't answer. He just walked out the door. Because he needed to know. Who was she? What was she doing? And why did it feel like she was destroying him? What would you buy if you only had 24 hours and unlimited money? The charge appeared at 11:32 a.m. $2,800. Memorial Hospital. Patient account 47829. Brooklyn. Harlan's assistant read it aloud from the tablet. That's not her daughter's account number. Harlan was in the back of his town car, stuck in traffic on the Brooklyn Bridge. He grabbed the tablet and scrolled through the patient details. Jamal Washington. Age 9. Leukemia treatment. Past due balance. A boy Lyrian had never met. A family she didn't know. Harlan's driver glanced in the rearview mirror. Sir, where exactly are we going? Harlan didn't answer. He was reading the transaction notes. The payment had cleared. The boy's treatment would continue. His phone buzzed again. $1,950. Women's Shelter Fund. Donation. Manhattan. Then another. $4,100. Insulin Supply Program. Bronx. She wasn't slowing down. She was speeding up. Harlan leaned forward. Take me to Long Island City. The shelter on Vernon Boulevard. The driver nodded and merged into the next lane. Harlan stared out the window. The East River glittered below. Across the water, the skyline of Queens looked gray and flat compared to Manhattan. He'd never been to that part of the city. Not in 20 years. When his assistant called his phone, he didn't pick up. When his lawyer texted him about a meeting, he ignored it. Because right now, the only thing that mattered was finding her. The car pulled up to a 3-story brick building with chipped paint and a sign that said Hope House Shelter. Harlan stepped out onto the cracked sidewalk. Inside, a woman at the front desk looked up. Can I help you? Harlan hesitated. He didn't know what to say. I'm looking for someone. A woman. She has a daughter. 7 years old. Hospital band. The woman's face softened. Lyrian? Harlan nodded. The woman pointed down the hall. 3rd door on the left. But she's not here right now. She left an hour ago. Harlan walked down the hallway anyway. The walls were covered in children's drawings. The floor smelled like bleach and old carpet. He stopped at the 3rd door and looked inside. A cot. A folded blanket. A small backpack in the corner. Nothing else. On the table next to the cot was a piece of paper. Harlan picked it up. It was a receipt. $3,200. Rent payment. Family of 4. Queens. And below it, written in pen, were the words. Because someone did this for me once. Harlan's hands started shaking. He sat down on the cot and stared at the receipt. Who was this woman? And why was she destroying everything he'd ever believed? Have you ever helped a stranger without expecting anything back? 3 years ago, Lyrian was standing in a hospital corridor in Queens. Perrin had just been diagnosed. Stage 2 blood cancer. The doctor said it was treatable. But it would cost $47,000. Lyrian didn't have $47,000. She didn't have $4,700. She barely had $47. She sat on the floor outside the pediatric wing and cried. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just silent tears that wouldn't stop. A woman sat down next to her. Older. Gray hair. Nurse scrubs. She didn't say anything. She just handed Lyrian an envelope. Inside was $50,000 in cash. Lyrian stared at it. Her hands were shaking. I can't take this. The woman smiled. Yes, you can. Because someone did this for me once. And now you'll do it for someone else. Then she stood up and walked away. Lyrian never saw her again. But she never forgot. That night, she made a promise to Perrin while the little girl slept in the hospital bed. If I ever get the chance, I'll give like she gave. Now, 3 years later, Lyrian was keeping that promise. She stood outside a pharmacy in Brooklyn, watching a mother cry at the counter because she couldn't afford her son's medication. Lyrian walked up and handed the pharmacist the black card. Put it on this. The mother turned around. Her eyes were red. I don't understand. Lyrian smiled. You don't have to. She walked out before the woman could say thank you. Because this wasn't about gratitude. It was about keeping a promise. By 2 p.m., Lyrian had paid 6 hospital bills. 4 shelter deposits. 2 insulin programs. And 1 family's rent for 3 months. She hadn't bought herself anything. Not food. Not clothes. Not even a cup of coffee. Because if this was her last day on earth, she was going to spend it the way that stranger had taught her. Giving. Not taking. And somewhere across the city, a billionaire was about to realize he'd been wrong his entire life. If you only had 1 day left, how would you spend it? Harlan found her at 9:47 p.m. She was sitting on a bench outside a children's hospital in the Bronx. Perrin was asleep on her lap. The black card was on the bench beside her. Unused. Harlan stopped 10 feet away. He didn't know what to say. Lyrian looked up. She didn't seem surprised. You came. Harlan walked closer. His throat felt tight. Why didn't you use it? Lyrian looked down at Perrin. I did. Harlan shook his head. Not for yourself. Not for her. For strangers. Lyrian's voice was quiet. Because 3 years ago, a stranger saved my daughter. And I promised I'd do the same. Harlan sat down on the bench. He stared at the card. You could have bought anything. A car. A house. You could have saved yourself. Lyrian smiled. I don't need saving. Other people do. Harlan's chest felt like it was collapsing. He'd spent 20 years believing poor people were selfish. That they wasted money. That they didn't deserve help. But this woman. She'd proven him wrong. With every charge. With every receipt. With every stranger she'd helped. Harlan covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. He was crying. Not for her. For himself. For every family he'd destroyed. Every hospital he'd closed. Every worker he'd fired. For all the lies he'd believed. Lyrian didn't say anything. She just sat there, holding her daughter, while a billionaire broke down next to her. After a long time, Harlan wiped his eyes. I'm sorry. Lyrian looked at him. Sorry doesn't fix what you broke. Harlan nodded. I know. He stood up. He pulled out his phone and made a call. It's me. Shut down the hospital division. All of it. I don't care what the board says. Do it by morning. He hung up and looked at Lyrian. I can't undo the past. But I can change what happens next. Lyrian didn't smile. She just nodded. Then do it. Harlan walked away into the night. And for the first time in 20 years. He felt like he was finally awake. Can one person really change after a lifetime of being wrong? The news broke 3 days later. Harlan Virex had shut down the most profitable division of his company. The one that bought failing hospitals in poor neighborhoods and flipped them for profit. Wall Street was in chaos. His board called an emergency meeting. His investors threatened lawsuits. His lawyers begged him to reconsider. Harlan didn't care. He sat in his penthouse and signed the dissolution papers. 18 hospitals in 7 cities. All returned to public ownership. All debts forgiven. His assistant stared at him. Sir, this will cost you $4.2 billion. Harlan nodded. Good. Then he made another call. I'm starting a fund. For families like hers. Medical bills. Rent. Food. Whatever they need. I want $500 million in it by the end of the week. His lawyer's voice cracked on the other end. Sir, that's your entire liquid reserve. Harlan smiled. Then I'll make more. He hung up. Over the next 2 weeks, Harlan dismantled everything he'd built on exploitation. He stopped the evictions in Miami. He rehired the workers in Dallas. He gave back the patents he'd stolen in San Francisco. The media called him crazy. His former friends called him weak. But Harlan didn't care. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't building an empire. He was building something real. 6 months later, Perrin was in remission. Lirian was working at the fund Harlan had created. Not because she needed the job, but because she wanted to help other families the way someone had helped her. Harlan visited the fund every week. Not for publicity. Not for credit. But because he needed to see the faces of the people he was helping. The families he'd once ignored. The workers he'd once fired. The children he'd once left behind. One afternoon, a reporter stopped him outside the fund's office in Queens. "Mr. Virex, people are saying you've lost your edge. That you're no longer the ruthless businessman you used to be. What do you say to that?" Harlan looked at the camera. "I say they're right. And I'm grateful." He walked away. And for the first time in 20 years, he felt rich. Is it ever too late to become a better person? Chapter 10. 2 years later, Harlan stood in front of a crowd of 200 people. They were families. Single mothers. Fathers who'd lost jobs. Children who'd been saved by the fund. Perrin was in the front row, holding her mother's hand. She was 9 now. Healthy. Smiling. Harlan cleared his throat. "I used to believe that poor people were poor because they made bad choices. That poverty was a character flaw. That if you gave them money, they'd waste it." He paused. "I was wrong." The room was silent. 2 years ago, a woman named Lirian Cade taught me something I should have known my entire life. Money doesn't reveal who people are. It reveals who they already were. He looked at Lirian. She had nothing. And she gave everything. Not because she was rich. But because she was kind. His voice cracked. "I had everything. And I gave nothing. Not because I was poor. But because I was empty." He stepped away from the microphone. "I can't undo the past. But I can change what happens next. And so can you." The crowd stood up. Not because they were told to. But because they wanted to. Harlan walked over to Lirian and Perrin. He knelt down in front of the little girl. "Thank you for saving my life." Perrin smiled. "You're welcome, Mr. Harlan." He stood up and looked at Lirian. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the person you already were." Lirian nodded. "Then you're on the right path." Harlan walked out of the building into the sunlight. For the first time in his life, he wasn't counting dollars. He was counting lives. And that was the only wealth that mattered. Money does not reveal who people are. It reveals who they already were. And sometimes, the poorest people are the richest in heart. What would you do with unlimited money for 24 hours? Would you spend it on yourself or someone else? If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story that will change how you see the world. We have something powerful coming tomorrow. Stay tuned, ***.